computer, not the cloud. Okay. Hi, we're here today on Country Pocket with Rachel Baiman, and the first song you just heard is She Don't Know What to Sing About Anymore. Rachel, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. That song is about someone who is maybe not doing well. How much of that description of the bright, musically inclined child growing up in that song, how much does that match what you were growing up?
Well, I did pull in a lot of like imagery from the Midwest and everything, but I can't say that I ever actually built corn castles, and I don't even know if that's a thing. But for some reason, that that was what came to me in that moment. A lot of the chorus is very real to my life, singing in the gospel choir, and my mom singing "Good Night, Ladies" to us. And then very much the kind of feeling of disillusionment, I guess, represented by the volcanic apocalypse in that song. So yeah, as always, a lot of things are autobiographical and a lot of things aren't. It's just like a combination.
So, what are the things that go on in the world that are the volcanic apocalypse to you? Because I feel like I deal with a lot of that too.
Yeah, I think that song was written deep in the pandemic, so I think there was probably a lot of feeling of um, you know, disaster on a global scale with that. I mean, it came to me from a dream, the idea of the volcanoes. So I'm not sure why that happened, but I can sort of interpret it to mean that everything is going on at once. And that was also the summer when there was, huge protests regarding racial justice and police shootings. And it definitely felt like a little bit apocalyptic within the pandemic. But I think a lot of the disillusionment also just comes from, dealing with the current state of trying to be an independent artist, and the anxiety and the self-promotion and everything that kind of goes along with that.
Oh, that's yeah, I feel like the art might come naturally to you. And a lot of things that I do, like doing it comes naturally, but then trying to brag about it and profit from it just doesn't feel right the same way. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I mean, I don't think any of us signed up to be creative professionals to then be professional marketers. I mean, it makes sense that it wouldn't feel um, natural, but at the same time, you're kind of asking for this independent life, which requires you to build a business. So it's like, I get that you can't just want to have it all and not have to put in that hard work around it, but it does feel like it's gotten to a point of kind of excess in terms of what's required.
So the idea of not knowing what to sing about anymore in a time of darkness, I'm not sure if that matches you too well because you certainly know how to draw a song out of the darkness.
Well, thank you. That's a big compliment. I think it's often it's the only thing that I sort of know how to do in those moments.
So, moving on to the next one, some strange notion. What is the notion that you see taking hold right now?
That's such a great question. I think the notion that I'm trying to present is like this shared experience of hardship. The idea that if you're just sitting there alone and you feel like you're really going through it and things are just a little bit too hard, you kind of don't feel like there's anything you can do with that feeling. But once you start to realize that almost everyone around you is feeling the same, then not only do you feel seen and a little bit more comforted in your, hardship and sadness, but there's also something to be gained from that. I mean, if everyone's going through this together, then that's an opportunity to make change, because it's obviously not just you that's finding it hard.
That should lead us to a place where we can make changes for the better.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the idea behind that song. You nailed it.
why does it seem like in practice, everyone suffering doesn't lead to sort of building a common nation of sorrow, but leads to everyone at each other's throats?
Because I think we haven't been able to find the shared problem. In my mind, um, there hasn't been a across the aisle realization of the way that the majority of us are being taken advantage of economically. And I think that that kind of feeds into everything. It feeds into anger and racism and misogyny. Like if people felt that they could, that they had opportunity, that they had the ability to build the life they wanted, I don't think that they would need to spend as much time on anger. And I think that the polarization is kind of something that is being fed to us to distract us from the actual systems at hand that are keeping the majority of us down. So I don't think we've really found that commonality yet, which is why I think we haven't made much progress. I think we're still arguing about the specifics of things that, of course, they matter. I mean, a lot of these things affect marginalized populations, and they're really important. And I don't want to sound like, racism and transphobia and these things are not important issues to tackle, because they really are. But I do think that there's this kind of like from the top drip feed of like things to make people angry, to keep us distracted from the fact that there's this small group of people at the top just kind of laughing and making millions of dollars off of doing nothing.
We'll talk about some of those people at the top when we come right back with Rachel Baiman. The new album is Common Nation of Sorrow. We are back with Rachel Baiman. You just heard the song Self-Made Man. Tell me about the myth of the self-made man in America.
This is, I think, one of the most strongly perpetuated notions that you can come to America, and if you work hard enough, you can do it by yourself. And I think that there was a time in our history where it was easier to kind of seem that someone was able to plop down here, and especially if they were a white man, they could sort of just build up a life for themselves that was far, far better than what they were handed, in their childhood. Um, University was accessible, property was accessible, all these things that, healthcare was accessible, all these things that we have kind of lost in our middle class now. And because of that, I think everyone feels like if they're not able to do it, something's wrong with them. And the reality is nobody is doing it by themselves these days. Maybe nobody was ever doing it by themselves. These things are a combination of generational wealth, access to people who have wealth, access to people who have connections, access to property, access to healthcare, racial and religious and sexual profiles. All of these things play a part in it. And at the end of the day, like most of us are, well, all of us are getting a helping hand in some way, if we're getting anywhere. And I think the more that we acknowledge that, the more we can talk about how to equalize that playing field a little bit more.
Is there any such thing as a billionaire in today's world who got their way to the top without stepping on all those people along the way?
I don't I don't know that it would be as conscious as that sounds, in the sense of like, I don't know if you would say like, well, you did that by doing X, Y, and Z to Bobby and Jimmy and Janet. It would be more like the way that the systems are set up are such that if you have some money, it's very easy to make money. If you have no money, you're constantly in debt and it's really hard to catch up. So I think that there's such a thing as a well-meaning and well-intentioned and potentially conscious billionaire, but there is not really such a thing as a system that maintains any sense of fairness in this country.
So it all sort of ties together, this system of unfairness and the sorrow you were talking about in the first two songs in the first segment.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wish there was some way to shake it all, you know? It's like I feel like once you've obtained a certain level of education and knowledge of how the system works, it becomes pretty clear what's going on, but sort of that combination of sorrow out there, a lot of them don't have the time and resources to go out there and learn what's going.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is about a willingness to have conversations with one another in a way that isn't condescending and um, kind of coming from a position of anger. I think that the polarization is such that people are just living in entirely different worlds, and it's hard to reach across that divide, especially if there's really harmful beliefs about marginalized people. And I totally get that. I think that, if you're somebody who's being targeted by that, it's not your job to reach across the aisle. But if you're in a position where you are safe and you can have the conversation, I think it's important to do it. I mean, I think the more that we don't understand where people are coming from emotionally, where they're coming from economically, where they're feeling trapped and just have no options and are feeling like they're being told that they're the bad guy in the situation. I think we all need to realize that the bad guys are the systems, and the bad guys are the people at the top that keep those systems in place. And it's not Joe Schmo who works a job for no money, and maybe they do have some troubling beliefs, but they're not really the ones perpetuating the issues that are keeping everyone in this place of anger and hatred.
Well said. You are someone who records a lot of their own material, and one of the songs from your last album that hit me really hard was called Rust Belt Fields.
Yeah.
Um, why did you choose to go out and put that cover on? And how does it seem to fit so well into this conversation?
Yeah, I think that's one that maybe just follows the through line of what I'm always coming back to in my music, which is like stories that help explain why people end up with like hateful beliefs, or stories of how people are affected by these systems. And that song I love so much. I mean, I really wish I did write that song. I would feel like I'd done my job as a songwriter. It's written by the great Slade Cleaves and Rod Picott. And I think that fit that album because I was trying to talk about like the cycles of all these different like internal and external cycles. And that song I related to really a lot because I am from the Midwest. And I think that song also has really guided me in the way that I want to write about politics moving forward. And a lot of times I teach political songwriting classes, and people kind of get frustrated with me because I think they come to the class wanting to use it as a place to vent about their political beliefs. And what I'm trying to teach is how to approach a song that can convey something emotionally, even if it's, the character in Rust Belt Field, you could imagine might not be a left-leaning character politically. And I think that song does such a good job of explaining how people get to a place that they do in their political beliefs. So yeah, that song's been a great teacher for me.
Let me ask you to close this show out by choosing a song from another artist. Um I want you to pick one that gives you some sort of level of catharsis against all of the sorrow. One that sort of fits into that old songs never die model of picking you
Sure.
up and existing as some part of our emotional fabric.
There's a song that I've been living with for about a year that um, has really shaken me. It's called Blue World. It's written by my friend Anna Tibble. And it's a song about dying. But it is so incredibly beautiful that has actually, this is maybe darker than what you were wanting, but it's kind of makes me feel calm about everything. Like that there's this kind of magic plane that you don't reach in your alive state, that there's somewhere, maybe it's like, I'm not religious, so maybe this is the thing that people get out of religion that I've never had. And so when I heard the song, I had that kind of comfort, of having no fear about death, about thinking of it as a way to kind of just move into this state of pure calm and beauty, and just like, anyway, you'll have to listen to the song. It absolutely blew me away.
Well, I'll be honest, I was not expecting a super happy song knowing what you tend to write. Um I don't know if I saw the death part coming.
It's not really like I don't know how to explain it. You have to listen to it, but it's so brilliant.
All right, I will take your word for it. Rachel Baiman, thanks so much for coming on, and let's play Blue World.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.